Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I want to talk to you today about something that will change your life if you truly grasp it. Too many of us are burdened, worried, and anxious about things that are beyond our control. We stress over tomorrow, we wrestle with problems that seem too big, and we fight battles that were never ours to fight in the first place. But I came to tell you today, leave it in God's hands and watch what happens. The reason so many of us struggle is because we are trying to carry what only God can handle. But let me remind you of something. God is not a man, and He's not limited by time, space, or circumstances. When He speaks, things shift. When He moves, obstacles crumble. And when He takes over, no enemy, no problem, and no situation can stand in His way. God's hands are greater than yours because He is the creator, the master, the one who spoke the universe into existence. Before you were even formed in your mother's womb, He knew you. He saw every step you would take, every challenge you would face, and every battle you would have to fight. And yet, He already made provision for your victory. The problem is, too many of us try to carry things that were never meant for our hands. We try to control, manipulate, and figure things out in our own wisdom. But the truth is, our hands are limited, while His hands are limitless. The reason people struggle is that they believe their hands are strong enough to build their future, fix their problems, and create opportunities. But the Bible reminds us, not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, says the Lord. That means it is not your strength, your effort, or your intelligence that will bring success. It is God's hands working behind the scenes that will open doors no man can shut. It is God's hands that will take what the enemy meant for evil and turn it around for your good. When you put things in His hands, you are placing them in the hands of the one who holds all power, all wisdom, and all authority. Think about this. Your hands can only reach so far. There are situations beyond your ability, problems beyond your strength, and obstacles beyond your resources. But God's hands can go where yours cannot. He can move in the hearts of people you've never met. He can shift circumstances that seem impossible. He can position you in places you never imagined. That's why you have to stop depending on your own strength and start relying on His hands. A child who trusts his father never worries about how the bills will be paid, how food will get on the table, or how the house will be protected. That child simply rests, knowing that the Father will take care of it. In the same way, God is your Father, and He is saying to you today, why are you stressing? Why are you worrying? Don't you know that I am your provider? Don't you know that I am your protector? Don't you know that I have already gone ahead of you and made a way? The problem is many of us trust God with our words, but we don't trust Him with our actions. We pray, but we still worry. We surrender, but we still try to control. And God is saying, if you would just take your hands off, I will show you what my hands can do. When you put something in God's hands, you are placing it into the hands that parted the Red Sea, the hands that shut the mouths of lions, the hands that fed 5,000 people with 2 fish and 5 loaves, the hands that healed the sick, raised the dead, and calmed the storm. These are not ordinary hands. These are supernatural hands. These hands have never failed. These hands have never failed. These hands have never been defeated. So why would you trust your limited hands when you can put everything into the hands of the Almighty? Some of you are carrying burdens that are weighing you down. You are holding on to disappointments, fear, and anxiety. But God is saying, give it to me. Stop trying to carry what you were never meant to carry. Stop trying to fix what only I can fix. Stop trying to control what is out of your control. My hands are greater than yours. My thoughts are higher than yours. My ways are beyond yours. Trust me and watch what I will do. Because the moment you release it into God's hands, things begin to shift. The moment you stop striving and start trusting, He steps in. The moment you let go of your plan and embrace his plan, doors begin to open. But as long as you hold on to it, you are blocking what he wants to do. Let it go, place it in his hands, and watch the impossible become possible. There is a power that many people never experience because they refuse to embrace one simple truth. You cannot receive what God has for you until you let go of what is no longer meant for you. Too many of us are holding on to things that God has been telling us to release. We hold on to past hurt, missed opportunities, relationships that have expired, and plans that no longer align with his purpose. And because we refuse to let go, we stay stuck in frustration, confusion, and disappointment. But there is a freedom that comes when you surrender. There is a breakthrough that happens when you release what is in your hands and trust God with what is in his. Letting go is not a sign of weakness. It is an act of faith. It is saying, God, I trust you more than I trust myself. I trust your wisdom more than my understanding. I trust your plan more than my own. The reason some people struggle is that they are still trying to control something that God has already told them to release. They pray for a new season, but refuse to leave the old one. They ask for new doors to open, but keep clinging to the ones that have already closed. They want God to do something new, but they won't let go of what is familiar. And God is saying, if you would just release it, I would show you what I have been preparing for you. When you hold on to what is no longer meant for you, you are not just carrying weight, you are blocking your blessing. You are trying to make something work that God has already called finish. You are trying to breathe life into something that he has already declared over. And as long as you hold on, you delay what he is trying to do. There is a reason why the Bible tells us to cast our cares on him. Because he never designed us to carry them. Worry, stress, and fear are the symptoms of a heart that refuses to let go. When you release something into God's hands, you don't have to carry the burden anymore. You don't have to figure it out. You don't have to manipulate the outcome. You simply have to trust that God's plan is better than yours. Think about how a seed works. A farmer plants a seed in the ground, but he does not dig it up every day to check on it. He does not stress over whether it is growing. He simply lets go and trusts the process. Some of you have prayed, but instead of letting go, you keep digging up the seed with doubt. You keep taking back what you already surrendered. You keep trying to figure out what God has already worked out. And because you won't release it, you cannot see the harvest that is waiting on the other side of your faith. There is something powerful about trusting God enough to release what is out of your control. There is something supernatural about saying, God, I don't understand it, but I trust you. I don't see the outcome, but I trust you. I don't know what's next, but I trust you. The people who walk in true peace are not the ones who have it all figured out. They are the ones who have learned how to let go. They are the ones who have stopped trying to force things, and instead they trust in the timing and the wisdom of God. Letting go does not mean you have failed. It means you are making room for something greater. It means you are no longer trying to force something that no longer fits. It means you are trusting that God has something better than what you are holding on to. The enemy wants you to believe that if you let go, you will lose. But in the kingdom of God, when you let go, you gain. When you surrender, you receive. When you stop striving, you step into supernatural provision. Let go and watch what happens. When you step back and allow God to take control, you position yourself to see the miraculous unfold. Too often, people limit God by trying to figure out how he is going to move, when he is going to act, and in what way he will answer. But God is not confined to human logic. He is not restricted by circumstances. He is not dependent on resources, connections, or systems. When God moves, he does things in ways that defy human reasoning. He specializes in doing the impossible, in making a way where there is no way, and in turning situations around when they seem beyond repair. The problem is that many people want to see God work, but they are too busy interfering with the process. They pray for God to handle it, but they keep trying to fix it themselves. They say they trust him, but they are still holding on to their own plans, their own timelines, and their own strategies. And God is saying, if you would just step back, if you would just trust me, if you would just release it into my hands, you would see what I am capable of. The reason some people never see the fullness of God's power is that they refuse to surrender fully. They want God to intervene, but they also want to maintain control. But God does not work on human terms. He works on divine principles. And one of those principles is this: when you let go, he steps in. When you stop striving, he starts moving. When you stand still, you will see the salvation of the Lord. Think about what happened when the Israelites stood before the Red Sea. They had Pharaoh's army behind them and an impossible barrier in front of them. In the natural, there was no solution, no escape, no strategy that could work. But that is exactly where God does his best work. When everything looks impossible, when human ability has reached its limit, when there is no earthly answer, that is when God steps in. And with one command, the waters parted and they walked through on dry ground. What seemed like a dead end became a supernatural doorway. What looked like destruction became deliverance. But if they had tried to figure it out themselves, they would have never experienced the miracle. Some people are standing at their own Red Sea right now. They see no way forward and the enemy is closing in behind them. Fear is whispering, it's over. Anxiety is telling them there's no escape. But God is saying, stand still and watch what I will do. There is no situation too big for him, no obstacle too great, no problem too difficult. He is still the same God who makes a way in the wilderness and streams in the desert. He is still the God who opens doors no man can shut. He is still the God who brings water out of a rock, who turns 5 loaves and 2 fish into enough to feed thousands, who speaks to storms and they obey. When you stop trying to figure it out and simply believe, you will see his hand move in ways you never expected. God does not need permission from your circumstances to bless you. He does not need everything to be perfect before he releases his favor. He does not require a logical explanation before he opens a door. All he needs is faith. When you trust him, when you take your hands off the situation, when you let go of your limited perspective, he will move in ways that will leave you in awe. He will turn setbacks into setups. He will take what the enemy meant for evil and use it for good. He will open the windows of heaven and pour out blessings you don't have room to contain. But you have to be willing to let him work. You have to be willing to stand in faith and refuse to let fear dictate your decisions. If you really want to see what God can do, then stop trying to force things in your own strength. Stop letting worry consume you. Stop letting doubt rob you of your faith. Watch what happens when you trust him completely. Watch how he shifts things in your favor. Watch how he turns the impossible into a testimony. Watch what God will do. Throughout history, God has been looking for people who will trust him completely, not just with their words, but with their actions. Trust is the foundation of faith. And when a person truly puts their confidence in God, extraordinary things happen. The Bible is filled with examples of men and women who faced impossible situations, but chose to trust God instead of their circumstances. And every time they trusted, God showed himself strong. Think about Abraham. God told him to leave his country, his family, and everything he knew to go to a place he would show him. Abraham didn't have a map, a plan, or a guarantee. All he had was a promise. And because he trusted God, he became the father of many nations. But his trust was tested again when God asked him to sacrifice Isaac, the very son that carried the promise. In the natural, it made no sense. How could the promise be fulfilled if the son was taken away? But Abraham trusted God so much that he believed even if Isaac died, God had the power to raise him again. And just as he lifted the knife, God provided a ram in the bush. That's what happens when you trust him. He always provides a way. Look at Moses. He had every reason to doubt himself. He was not a great speaker, he was not a warrior, and he had a past that could have disqualified him. But God called him anyway. When he stood before the Red Sea with Pharaoh's army behind him, fear could have overtaken him. But he chose to trust. And because he lifted his staff in obedience, God parted the waters and led his people to safety. When you trust God, you don't need all the answers. You just need to take the step he told you to take, and he will do the rest. Then there's Joseph. His life looked like a series of disappointments. Betrayed by his own brothers, thrown into a pit, sold as a slave, falsely accused and locked in prison. If anyone had a reason to doubt God's plan, it was Joseph. But instead of questioning God, he trusted him. Instead of complaining, he remained faithful. And in one moment, God took him from the prison to the palace. The very people who betrayed him had to come back and bow before him because what they meant for evil, God turned for good. That is what trust does. It turns pain into promotion, setbacks into setups, and betrayal into blessings. What about David, a young shepherd boy, overlooked by his family, ignored by the world? But God saw something in him that no one else did. When he stood before Goliath, he had no armor, no sword, no army backing him. All he had was trust in the name of the Lord. While everyone else ran in fear, David stood in faith. And with one stone, he defeated the giant because he knew the battle was not his, but God's. Trusting God means understanding that your strength is not enough, but his is. Then we have Esther, a Jewish girl in a foreign kingdom, placed in a position she never asked for. When her people were threatened with destruction, she had a choice: to stay silent or to trust God and step out in courage. She risked her life by going before the king, but because she trusted God's timing and purpose, an entire nation was saved. Trusting God often requires stepping into the unknown, but when you do, he goes before you and makes a way where there was no way. And then there's Jesus, the ultimate example of trust. In the Garden of Gethsemane, as he prepared to face the cross, he prayed, "Not my will, but yours be done." He trusted the Father's plan, even though it meant suffering. And because he did, salvation was made available to all of humanity. Trusting God does not mean the road will be easy, but it does mean that victory is guaranteed. Every one of these people face a choice: trust God or trust their fear, trust God or trust their circumstances, trust God or trust their own understanding. And every time they chose to trust him, he showed up, he delivered, he provided, he promoted, and he fulfilled his promises. The same God who was faithful to them is the same God who will be faithful to you. If he did it before, he will do it again. Trust him and watch what he will do. There are moments in life when things are taken away, doors close, relationships end, and opportunities slip through our fingers. In those moments, it is easy to feel like something is being lost, like we are being stripped of what we once had. But what if the very thing that is being removed is not a loss, but a setup for something greater? What if God is not taking something from you, but making room for something you could not yet see? God never removes without a purpose. When he takes something away, it is always because he is about to replace it with something better. The challenge for many people is that they hold on too tightly to what God is trying to release them from. They cry over closed doors, mourn over lost opportunities, and struggle with letting go of what was, not realizing that God is making space for what will be. When God removes something, it is never to leave you empty. It is to position you for increase. But you cannot receive what is coming if you are still holding on to what is gone. Sometimes what we call a loss is actually a divine exchange. What seems like rejection is actually redirection. What feels like an ending is really the beginning of something new. Think about Abraham. He loved his home, his country, and his family. But God told him, leave this place and go to the land I will show you. God was removing him from the familiar because he had something greater in store. If Abraham had refused to leave, he would have never walked into the promise. Many times, the reason people do not step into their destiny is that they refuse to let go of their history. They are so connected to what was that they're unable to embrace what is coming. But when God removes, it is always with the intention to replace, to increase, to promote, and to elevate. Look at Job. He lost everything. His wealth, his health, his family. From the outside, it looked like destruction. But in reality, it was preparation. Because at the end of Job's trial, God restored him double for everything he lost. He ended up with twice as much as he had before. That is how God works. What the enemy meant for evil, God turns for good. What was lost, he replaces with something greater. But in the moment of loss, it can be difficult to see the replacement that is coming. That is why trust is so important. If you trust God, you will not panic when something is taken away. You will not fall into despair when a door closes. You will not break down when a season ends. You will stand firm knowing that God never subtracts without adding something greater. Joseph experienced this firsthand. He was taken from his home, stripped of his position, betrayed by his brothers, and thrown into a pit. But what seemed like loss was actually God repositioning him for the palace. He lost his coat, but he gained a crown. He lost his place in his father's house, but he gained authority over an entire nation. If Joseph had held on to what was taken from him, he would have never stepped into what God had for him. Some things have to be removed because they are too small for where God is taking you. Some relationships have to end because they cannot go with you to your next level. Some opportunities have to close because God has something much greater that you have not yet seen. Jesus himself demonstrated this truth. When he walked the earth, he told his disciples, "It is better for you that I go, because if I do not go, the helper will not come." In other words, something had to be removed for something greater to be released. His physical presence had to leave so that the Holy Spirit could come and dwell in every believer. Sometimes what seems like an ending is actually an expansion. What looks like a loss is actually gain in disguise. If something has been removed from your life, do not grieve as if you have lost everything. Do not mourn over what was when God is preparing what will be. He is too wise to take something without replacing it. He is too faithful to leave you with less than what he intended for you. Trust him when things are taken away, and soon you will see what he's bringing in its place. Because when God removes, he always replaces. And what he gives is always greater than what was lost. There are moments in life when it feels like nothing is changing, nothing is moving, and nothing is working in your favor. You have prayed, you have believed, you have stood in faith, but the breakthrough has not yet come. It is in these moments that many people give up too soon. They walk away from their promise just before it manifests. They quit just before the door opens. They lose faith just before the victory is revealed. But what they do not realize is that the delay is not a denial. Just because you have not seen it yet does not mean it is not on the way. Your breakthrough is coming. One of the greatest tests of faith is learning how to wait on God without losing your confidence. It is easy to trust him when everything is happening quickly. It is easy to believe when doors are opening and prayers are being answered immediately. But what do you do when it feels like nothing is changing? What do you do when you are standing on a promise, but all you see is delay? That is when true faith is revealed. Faith is not proven in the moments of success. It is proven in the moments of waiting. Can you still believe when nothing looks like it is working? Can you still hold on when everything around you tells you to let go? Because the truth is, the waiting season is never wasted. God is not ignoring you. He is preparing you. What looks like a delay is actually development. He is strengthening your faith, refining your character, and positioning you so that when the breakthrough comes, you will be ready to handle it. Think about Joseph. He had a dream of greatness, but instead of stepping into his destiny immediately, he was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and locked in prison. Year after year passed, and it seemed like nothing was happening, but God was working behind the scenes. Every trial, every setback, every delay was part of the process. And when the appointed time came, Joseph was promoted in one day. The years of waiting were not wasted. They were necessary. Because when breakthrough comes, it happens suddenly. The enemy wants you to believe that because you have not seen it yet, it is not coming, but that is a lie. The fact that you are facing resistance is proof that something is about to break. The enemy does not fight what is not a threat. He does not attack what is not valuable. If you are facing opposition, it is because your breakthrough is closer than you think. The closer you get to the promise, the more intense the battle becomes. But do not be discouraged. The pressure you are feeling is not a sign of defeat. It is a sign of transition. Just like a woman in labor, the pain increases just before the birth. The struggle intensifies just before the manifestation. If you do not quit, you will see the promise come to pass. God is a God of appointed times. He is never early and he is never late. When the time is right, he will make it happen. The breakthrough you have been praying for is already scheduled. The provision you need has already been assigned. The door you have been knocking on has already been prepared to open. But you must hold on. You must remain steadfast. Because when the breakthrough comes, it will not be small. It will be bigger than you imagined. It will be greater than you expected. It will be exceedingly, abundantly above all you could ask or think. So today, whatever is troubling you, whatever is keeping you up at night, put it in God's hands. Stand still. Trust him. And watch what happens. Because when God is in control, victory is guaranteed. God bless you.